Welcome to the Just Steward Podcast. I am Doug Connolly, and I'm here with my partner,
Michael Frigon.
All right, and our guest today is Cameron Riecker. Cameron, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for coming. And so we're just a little bit about the podcast for those who are tuning in for the first time. We are a podcast about how to prepare the next generation spiritually, intellectually, materially, grammatically, ecumenically, as Captain Jack Sparrow would say, just for every way possible going forward. And we talk to people in various fields, areas of expertise about the issues facing the next 25 years and how to combat them. And Cameron here has a very great story and a very great mission. He's got a very active and YouTube channel that supports his family. So that is no small feat when you're supporting your family through a medium like that. So congratulations, Cameron. Basically, and it's the best way to find you again is YouTube at Cameron Riecker, correct?
Yeah. YouTube, Instagram. I'm just Cameron Riecker pretty much everywhere. So you can find me. I didn't make myself hard to find.
Well, and we're going to get well into what you do. But Cameron, I have something I want to check in on. Our mutual friend who we connected with initially, we met, you may remember, but we met at Halloween at their house. I'm not using their names because this friend is particularly private. And he said, that was the last time you and I talked in person. And he said, yeah, Doug Connolly wants to interview you. And you were having trouble placing me. And then he told me, he said, he's the guy who always has to take his kids out of mass. And you said, and that's when the light went off.
I don't know about that. I think the indicator, because I had some idea who you are, I just couldn't place a face to the name. And then he said bald guy. And then he said scruffy beard. And I think the beard was what finally pushed me over the edge. I was like, okay, I know who that is. So
I was hoping that it was the kids in the mass, because if you're that guy who's the guy who's at a Latin mass parish, if you're the guy whose kids are out of control at Latin mass parish, that is really saying something. So
you don't have to go out a lot.
Yeah.
So I kind of can corroborate that observation.
I'm too busy with my own kids to notice many other people's kids. So don't worry about it.
Well, I get excited when I go out and I say, oh, Doug's out here too.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Michael's seen me leave a few times. So yeah. We had family in 3 different parts of the church this past Sunday. So we did for strategic reasons. So
that's impressive. Divide and conquer, right?
Divide and conquer. Yes. I don't know who's dividing and who's conquering.
Or you just filled in whatever spots were still open when you walked in.
Well, Cameron, I want to talk about your mission. You're an online apologist, doing it quite well. You've also got a side aspect of that, which I think is perhaps even more interesting, and we'll get to that. But first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up. I know, like you're our second guest in a row, at least as we record this, who, like me, is from the state of Indiana. But tell us a little bit about your growing up and your family situation. Just take 3 to 5 minutes, lay it out, the 30,000 foot view, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I was born in Southern Indiana, grew up a cradle Catholic, went to college and started to date a girl who was a Protestant. And I'd been kind of a lukewarm Catholic, going to mass on Sundays. That was about it for my whole life. But through this relationship with this Protestant woman, I figured out I didn't have any idea what I believed or why I believed it. So I got really, really into apologetics, scripture study, Thomas Aquinas, the philosophy and theology of the church. That relationship with that woman didn't work out, but God had other plans for introducing that person in my life at that time. After that point, I decided I wanted to give my life totally to Jesus Christ. And so I went to seminary, because what else are you going to do if you want to be holy? I was in seminary for only 1 semester. God said, thank you for your application, but we're going a different direction with this. And I quickly discerned out, got a job teaching in Arizona, actually in Scottsdale, Arizona, at a Catholic high school. Taught theology there for 4 years. And during that time, met my wife. Now we're married. We live out here in Arizona, have 2 kids and 1 due in December. So we're busy.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Also, just out of curiosity, I think we covered this when we talked in person last, but what college did you go to again?
For undergrad, University of Southern Indiana in Evansville, Indiana. I have a degree in biology, actually, of all things. And then my master's is in theology from Franciscan.
Gotcha. Where'd you try out seminary, if you don't mind my asking?
St. Meinrad, Indiana.
I was going to say, I have a high school teacher in Michigan who went there, and I have an uncle who went there. And then there's at least 2 priests in the diocese who went there as well. And my priest in Austin went there.
2 priests. I'm only aware of 1. I wonder who the other one is.
I'll tell you offline.
There you go.
I don't know why it matters. It's just that the priest I'm thinking of is pretty, you never know. So,
Fair enough. Yeah.
All right. I'll tell you offline. It's not that big of a... So it's produced a lot of great priests in my life, at least. All right. And so one thing I wanted to start with, I want to start with this. Sure. The online apologetics, but The other time we met, you told me something very interesting. You also coach men in getting off of pornography, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
All right. So what's that like? So I first of all, how do you get clients that way? Because there's lots of online apologists and not all of them as good as you, clearly. But it doesn't seem like this is something that I've been poked around a little bit that you're really throwing out there. So you must get approached a lot about this. How do people find you in that
Yeah,
in that?
it's not something that I advertise on every single video or every day or anything like that. It's simply a problem that's so pandemic, both inside and outside of the church, that it's just an underserved market. And so anytime I put a post out saying, "Hey guys, if you're a young man struggling with lust, I'm putting together a coaching program for you. Click here if you're interested." I'll get 50, 60, sometimes 100 or 200 applications just from one post across my socials. And that basically fills up my capacity for a month and a half. And then, you go a few weeks and then you run another course and you can do the same thing. But yeah, it's not something it's something that is so underserved right now that I have no problem with marketing, right? And I wish that more people were doing this. The apologetics is good.
I may start now. Thanks to what you're telling me, because I could use some extra income.
The entrepreneur in you is coming out. The
Yeah.
apostolic entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The apologetics is good and it's wonderful and it's necessary. You need to know your faith before you can love your faith. But at the same time, it doesn't matter how much you know about the papacy from the 4th century if you're chronically falling into mortal sin for other reasons. It just doesn't matter, right? And so there really needs to be a focus, I think, in the church and especially in the online sphere, because that's simply where young men are. And young men are the ones who are struggling with this more than anybody else. There needs to be a focus, I think, on really talking about purity, being practical strategies for overcoming it, as well as trying to provide some sort of community aspect for men who are struggling with this. Because all the men that I talk to, they all have the exact same story. 90% of them, at least, have the exact same story. Yeah, I stumbled upon this stuff when I was between 8 and 12 years old, and I kind of just messed with it through high school and middle school, and it just became a really bad habit. And now I'm really struggling to quit. It's got its claws in me and I can't get out. That's a story I hear over and over and over and over again. That's 85% of the guys I talk to. They encounter at a young age, get hooked before they really know what it is, and then they're struggling with it for years afterwards. Some people even carry this into their marriage, which is another thing that really, really ought to be rooted out before people get married. But since that's the case, there really needs to be a focus from Catholic men on doing something about this, right? Because this is the number one. I've got, I don't know, something like 1,000 surveys now filled out, and of young men who are interested in the coaching program, probably 85% of them say their number one complaint is lust. So it's like, this is the problem that's killing the souls of millions inside and outside of the church. This is the pandemic, the real pandemic that's worldwide at this point, right? So yeah, that's why I do it. It's not so much that it's not something I really envisioned myself doing whenever I first got into this, but it's something that there's such a need for that here I am. Yeah.
Are you at liberty to say, because this might screw up your whole system, but are you at liberty to say, as you triage, what makes you choose one person over another?
As I am going through and
Yeah,
looking
you're going
for
through,
applications.
you can't take
Yeah.
everyone. So
Yeah. So I typically don't work with men who have been married a long time. I haven't been married a long time, so I don't feel like I have expertise to speak in that area. The course that I've put together for young men is largely my own experience mixed with my understanding of Thomistic philosophy and anthropology and theology. So I put all that together, and it's a very, very personal course. It's a course that's something that really echoes my own experiences all throughout. So I work with men who are similar enough to me to where they'll get the same results if they apply the same methods. So I'm usually looking for men in their mid-20s who are single, engaged, maybe newly married, and those are kind of the men that I target, right? Where if somebody's 45 or 50 and they apply, I hope you get help, but I'm just not the guy to do it. You have to specify and you have to design a course for a certain avatar, for a certain type of person in order to get the results that they're going to want, right? If you try to go
50,
too
just
broad,
have them
it's
come to
not
me.
useful. What'd you say?
I'm 50. Just have them come to me. So,
Okay.
don't do it.
There
What
you
do
go,
you
Doug.
think?
You got to market now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the tough part. I've never been able to do that well. What do you suspect is, well, I think it's wise, obviously, to not speak to men who've been married a long time, because, you haven't been married a long time, but you probably can still help them. But I get it. You got to have a focus, stay in your lane. But what do you suspect might be the difference in how that would handle for men who have been married a long time? What do you think that they need that you aren't the best person to offer?
So I think the amount of shame and vulnerability is increased, and that would be better handled by somebody who has a lot of marriage experience behind them and a little more history than I would maybe. Whereas if you're a single man and you're falling into this, it's like, yeah, you're probably just a single 24-year-old kind of stupid kid. So it's like, yeah, you messed up. Get back on the horse. Here we go. Come on. But if somebody's married, I think that the amount of isolation and the amount of shame that's concomitant with that type of sin is increased because of the fact that it's not only a sin against yourself, but you're also sinning against your spouse or children in a certain capacity, right? Jesus says, Matthew chapter 6, he who looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery with her. And so I think that that's something that I could figure out how to deal with, but it's not something I have any experience with, and I don't have a set system for it. And there are other people that do. So if somebody was looking for help and was in that situation, I would probably refer them to a couple of my friends who do therapy, life coaching, counseling, that kind of thing, simply because they've built programs, they've built expertise in doing that, and I have not. So not that my principles wouldn't help them, but it's just you're going to get better effects with somebody who's designed something specifically to remedy that ailment.
Okay. Makes sense. For me, I'm old enough to remember where we used to have this kind of a libertarian approach to some aspects of sin, or in social issues, be it the libertarian approach to abortion. That falls apart pretty quickly. But I fell for libertarian ideas such on things like marriage. What does it matter what the state thinks? I think in my stupid past, and I probably didn't give pornography that much thought, but I'm certain there's a lot of people who felt that, hey, porn, consenting adults, blah, 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 whatever they do. For me, an inflection point happened when it wasn't my awakening to how the porn is bad, but this is where I realized how messed up society is, was back in 2017, within a month of each other, you had Hugh Hefner dying and being lauded as a hero, and then Harvey Weinstein being raked over the coals for taking advantage of young women. And I said to myself, this is a society that is very, very about sex. And given where we are, it seems like, and you've seen, this is kind of like wasn't this Russell Brand's kind of entry into the whatever pseudo Christianity or pseudo Catholic? I don't mean that disparagingly, but his sort of move into spirituality. I think porn was one of the first things. Do you think that it's become now that porn is kind of like, it's like a selling point of Catholicism now? Because it's like, you can say that to just about anyone that hey, porn's bad and it should be illegal and it's exploitative and you can't really limit its effect to, and everyone's just like, yeah, you know what? I kind of agree with that. I can get behind that.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the necessary consequence of just the trajectory of the society right now. If you just look all throughout human history, there's a pendulum that's always swinging, and people are constantly going to one extreme or swinging back to the other. And there's very little time spent in the middle. You look at early American history, very puritanical, very, very much concerned with appearance and modesty in a sort of extreme sense. Now we've kind of swung the other direction and we see almost the exact opposite. I actually think that within 50 to 100 years, there may be some movements among Christians to kind of loosen up some of the standards on TV again. I think that within maybe 100, 150 years, I don't know the timeline exactly, but I think we're going to see that pendulum swing back to the other extreme, at least within culture. Obviously, people always sin privately. They always sin individually. But at least as far as cultural norms go, I think within my lifetime, possibly, we're going to start to see that pendulum swing in the other direction. Because you can only go so far in one direction before you realize the manifest absurdity of some of the principles that got you there, right? And you can just go out in the street and walk around and see how people are dressed, see how people choose to tattoo themselves, see how people choose to color their hair in different directions. And there's just manifest absurdity that's starting to appear within the culture at large. Not that any one of those individual things can't be done, in a way that's more prudent or less prudent. But generally, you're starting to see that people are sick and they're actually out of touch with reality. And that's because of the principles that we've taken to their logical conclusions. The culture, I think, is really starting to wake up to this. I'm boots on the ground. I'm talking to hundreds and hundreds of young men who are Catholic men at various points in their faith walk. And they're all recognizing this idea that whatever we've been doing regarding sexuality for the past 50 years, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Maybe you're stuck in a system, you're stuck in some addiction, you're stuck in some sin, but you at least realize the system is fundamentally flawed and broken, and you need to jump the ship before it sinks, right? So I think that's starting to happen in the culture writ large. You see people like Michael Knowles. He recently did a video talking about how OnlyFans should be banned. And he just asked the crowd, he's like, who here thinks that OnlyFans should be banned? And basically the entire crowd, all the men started cheering and saying yes. It's like, that's the direction that the culture is going in. And I'm starting to see very, very strong undercurrents of that in the men that I work with and just in the culture at large.
I could see Michael Knowles going into a room full of people who want to kill him, not hard to find at a college campus, and saying who thinks OnlyFans should be banned. And probably like a third to half the people would say, yeah. So that's kind of where we're getting.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is that the sexual principles of the sexual revolution are naturally sterilizing. And so they're not something that they don't reproduce themselves over the generations. They have to constantly be preying on families who are open to life in order to create disciples of the death culture. So it's not something that naturally self-propagates. And once families start to do a good job again, because the internet took a lot of people off guard. This is why everyone who's my age or around my age, they all say they're exposed to pornography between 8 and 12 years old. It's because of the internet. Your parents didn't have any idea what the internet was or what it could do. And so they didn't safeguard it and they didn't know the dangers of it. But I think millennials, people in Gen Z are going to be very aware of the dangers of the internet, very aware of the dangers of these AI chatbots that are just doing all kinds of horrific things. And so they're going to be able to protect their children better and sort of prevent that falling away. So the culture of death, it just kind of starves itself out.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little more, because I get the whole purpose of this podcast is stewardship. So when we're talking to you about these issues, we're thinking about it in the context of how can particularly parents, and everyone really, but let's just focus on parents for now. How can parents effectively steward their children in a way that prevents these things from happening? And you touched already on, the aspect of we just didn't know the dangers of the internet. I mean, I think that's becoming extremely clear that was a big mistake. People just didn't have any knowledge of what was going on with their kids and what they were doing on the internet. But I'm curious as to what your prescription is, or what your actual recommendations are to help these kids who, yes, we're focused on, like, the Catholics definitely are more inclined to want to protect against this. But if they're not in a Catholic community, if they're exposed to other kids, they're going to get exposed to it somehow. What are you going to do to, or what can you do to protect against this and kind of stop it before it happens in your own children?
Yeah. So few things that I would say right off the bat is, one is you have to keep in mind that, yes, there are natural things that you can do. There are good habits. There are psychology tricks. There are all kinds of natural ways you can manipulate who your children hangs out with and doesn't hang out with, et cetera, et cetera. All of that's good. All of that's good. It needs to be addressed. But even prior to that, as men, we need to recognize that we have an enemy, the devil, who prowls about like a lion seeking someone to devour, and he loves to prey upon children. And their first line of defense is the father. And so if we don't have a culture that lauds genuine Christian masculinity as the sort of bodyguard of the family, as the first line of defense, then what's going to happen is, well, your wife's going to be targeted. Your children are going to be targeted. Why? Well, it's like Jesus says in Luke's gospel. He says that you can't break into a house and pilfer it. You can't rob a house unless you first bind the strong man, and then you can go in and do what you want, right? Christian fathers right now, in large part, are those strong men. And right now, in large part, they're bound. They're derelict in duty. They're not standing up and fighting the spiritual warfare that they need to. And the lives and souls of their wife and children are suffering. So the first thing is, men need to step up and need to be spiritual warriors. You are, as a father and as a husband, you are the bishop, the king, the priest of your household. And look, all throughout the Old Testament, all throughout the New Testament, all throughout church history, 100% of the time, it's trickle down holiness, with very few exceptions. So if the king is good, the people prosper and things go well. If the king is wicked, the enemies start to creep in, cross the borders, and take over the land. Church history, Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, all of it, the same story. It's this trickle down holiness. So if you want to protect your wife and children, the first thing that you have to do is learn to take very good care of your own soul. It's going to have a few natural effects. One is that, which I already laid out, the idea that the husband's the bodyguard. And so if a bad guy wants to get in the house, you got to go through the bodyguard. And if the bodyguard is spiritually alive, taking his prayer life seriously, there's a natural layer of protection that's afforded simply by that being done. Secondarily, however, it's important to keep in mind that, let's see, where was I going with this? Whenever you're dealing with this trickle down holiness, the prayer of a righteous man avails much, right? So there's this idea that the holier that you become, the more efficacious your prayers become. The more that you resemble Christ, the more that your words take on the power of Christ. This is what it means. The more righteous you are, the more that your prayer is heeded by God. The more obedient you are to God, the more obedient God is to you. So husbands and fathers need to be very, very diligent about being holy so that their prayers are effective in protecting their wives and children. So that's the first side of things, is the spiritual side of things. You could do a whole lecture on binding prayers, a whole lecture on whatever element of spiritual warfare that you want. But then on the other side of that, parents have a grave obligation to monitor not only the internet consumption that their kids have on their cell phone, laptop, whatever, but they also have a grave obligation to monitor who their kids are hanging out with, where their kids are going to school. Within the bounds of prudence, they have a grave obligation to make sure that they're not putting their children in any near occasions of sin, insofar as it's prudently possible, right? So there's a few things. Is one, the spiritual side of things. Two is bubbles for kids are great. The bubble's wonderful, right? It's not meant to last forever in a certain sense. Eventually you're going to be exposed to real evil, but the bubble is very good. It's something that should be protected, something that should be used for kids as much as is possible prudently.
Do you think you'll be homeschooling your kids?
You know, my oldest daughter is 3 right now, but that's kind of the direction that we're leaning, is homeschooling, maybe some sort of cohort. Yeah, we haven't made any concrete decisions yet, but we're kind of leaning in that direction.
It's wise to just let that, take it 6 months at a time. Given how my attitudes changed and stuff like that, I once bought a minivan knowing that in 3 months my wife was going to have a baby and it no longer fit our family. So that's how much I think sort of we. So, but anyway. So I would have never thought homeschooling would have been a valid option for us, but now I think that, like, if something didn't work out, we're at a charter school. If it doesn't work out for one of our kids, I think we'll be looking at homeschooling. We have to pivot. We're fortunate so far. So tell us a little bit about how the apologetics as a career began, because I do know enough about your story to know that you actually got up and running pretty quickly. And so, beyond insurance money from a car accident, what do you credit that to?
Yeah. So necessity is the mother of invention, I suppose. I quit my job, had no source of income, and had to figure out how to pay my mortgage off of my YouTube channel within the span of about 4 or 5 months. So we didn't make any money to start with. You know, we're making hundreds of dollars on YouTube, not thousands of dollars necessary to pay a mortgage here in the Phoenix area. And so, yeah, I think that a couple things came into play. One is just when you put your back against a wall, trying to do something good, trying to do something that's admirable and that our Lord approves in his holy name, then he gives you everything that you need to accomplish whatever end you've set yourself to. The second thing is, one of the promises of the rosary is that anyone who spreads devotion to the rosary will be aided by Mary in all of their necessities. And that was a promise I took to the bank. Whenever we were low on funds for whatever reason, I would always make a video or two that was really spreading the rosary, pushing the rosary, encouraging people to pray the rosary. And I don't know how many people it's affected, but I get comments on a fairly regular basis of people saying, "Hey, thank you. I've started to pray the rosary daily because of you," or "I've started to pray all 4 sets of the mysteries daily because of you." And I think that at this point, I am just not worried about being able to provide for my family. I'm not worried about the outcome of any of my business endeavors. Obviously, prudently, you have to be wary. You have to do the work that you're supposed to do. You have to be wise. You have to be caring. You have to be diligent, all of that. But ultimately, I am completely in the hand of Our Lady, and wherever she wants me to go, I'll go. And my YouTube, all my business endeavors, everything is consecrated to her. So if she wants it to do well, she'll make it happen. And if she just wants to take it away from me and burn it to the ground, she'll make it happen too. It's up to her. It's not up to me anymore. And so I think just having that disposition, that sort of surrender to the providence of God and to the loving care of Our Lady, everything it works out. If it's consecrated to Mary, it works out in the end. It always does.
Was it ever a viable option for you to try it for a year as you taught, or did you have that mindset that, look, I want to have no ripcord?
No, I think the bane of talented people is that they spread themselves too thin. I think that any successful
untalented people too, I can attest to that.
I think if you want to make something work, you can't flirt with it. You got to marry it, right? And so with the idea of starting my own business and doing all this, I basically just said, I stopped asking the question, is this going to work? And I just started asking, how am I going to make this work? And once you change your perspective on that, it changes everything. I forget which saint it is. I need to look this up. But one of the saints said that God has so ordained that all things can be purchased with effort. And that's simply a fact, right? And you see this in the natural realm as well as in the supernatural realm with people that have grace and people that don't have grace. If you set your mind to something, God has given human nature a tremendous capacity to cause things, a tremendous capacity to accomplish great things. And so if you simply set your mind to something and don't make failure an option, then you usually attain your end. Or if not, something better usually comes out of it.
So you're obviously very talented at this, at apologetics, at teaching. What's your advice for people who, they want to do right by themselves, by their families, they want to pass on the faith, and maybe it's hard for them to wrap their heads around Aquinas or, even understand the saints and some of their teachings and even understand what the priest is saying during mass and his sermons. Catholicism, especially today, it's a very intellectual religion. It hasn't always been, that it's always had the intellectual side of it. But I feel like today, especially, I read an article recently about how the Catholic faith is over intellectualized at the moment. What's your advice to people who are like, who don't really, feel like they are equipped to learn and teach the faith for whatever reason? Sometimes it's just time. These people might be working multiple jobs and they don't have the time to sit down and catechize their kids. They're trusting these Catholic schools or Sunday school to do it, and maybe they can't really trust them to do that well. What should people do?
So it's different if you're trying to learn the faith as opposed to if you're trying to teach the faith. I'll start with trying to teach the faith first. The first thing I would say is whenever you are trying to teach the faith, I had a conversation with Father Riecker maybe 2 years ago, and he gave me this gold nugget as a passing comment. He really wasn't even focusing on this specifically. But what he said is you can prepare the most logical, airtight, rhetorically polished, amazing sermon of all time. And he says, if you do not pray for those who are going to hear you speak, it will fall on deaf ears every time. Every time. So that's one of the major reasons I think my YouTube channel has had success is every single day I pray, and at least habitually, I have the disposition to ask our Lord and our Lady to open the ears and the hearts of all who will hear me speak, right? Because ultimately my words are just some sound waves that vibrate through your speakers, right? There's actually nothing consequential there. It's up to God to endow any of the words or actions that I have with any sort of spiritual significance to actually move minds and hearts. So the first thing is if you're trying to be an able teacher, there's a couple of things that you need to do. One is make sure that you are praying for those who are going to hear you speak, because keep in mind, the enemy is trying to distract people whenever they're listening to a homily, a spiritual sermon, maybe apologetics. The enemy is trying to sow seeds of discontent, of discord, emotional disrest, all of these things. And so there's a spiritual aspect that needs to be addressed so that whenever you're sowing seeds, so to speak, it's falling upon fertile ground. You have to ask God to remove the stones of people's hearts, et cetera, et cetera. Secondarily, you have to keep in mind that whenever you're trying to teach, most people are not so sharp that you can explain something once and they understand it. Most people need you to explain it, then to make an analogy or tell a story explaining the same thing again, but slightly differently so they don't feel patronized and don't get bored. And then after you get done, you say something like, so to sum up what we've covered so far is da, da, da. So every time I do a video, if you watch carefully, the reason that people watch my videos and go, oh, that makes so much sense is because I intro it by just saying kind of the principles and what it is. Then I tell a story or make an analogy explaining the same thing again. Then I summarize by saying, okay, this is what we've covered so far. So they get the same piece of information 3 times, right? You have to figure out how to do that, how to be repetitive without being patronizing. And once you can do that, you can teach anybody anything, assuming that you understand it well.
Is that what they taught you at seminary?
No, actually, I never took a homiletics course at seminary. No, that's not it.
That's great.
But yeah.
How much of I guess, so it sounds to me like you're optimistic about the state of Catholicism for the next 25 years or so. I'll let you in on my theory. First of all, on a couple things, and you can comment and make it better. But you mentioned about how we have to have our guards up and everything like that as parents. And I do think that while we can't really fully escape the world, I think that doesn't work too well. We can try and we can insulate ourselves to a degree. But it does seem like the battle lines are much more clearly drawn now than they were when I was. My parents made lots of decisions, and they're good parents. They're good Catholic parents, but they made lots of decisions that I think all three, me, my parents, and I all are like, wow, that's kind of surprising we went that way. But I look at the people they were around, people to the right or the left of them, and they thought they could make compromises with their culture. It really probably shouldn't have been made. But I also look around as other people in my generation. There's really been a lot of loss of faith from Catholic uh, going from Catholic grandparents, kids my age or a little younger who are not Catholic at all. And I think part of that is my theory is that the Catholic grandparents, people my grandparents' age, said the rosary. The parents maintained a lot of their faith. These would be the baby boomer generation, people my parents' age. But many of them might have maintained their faith, but they didn't say the rosary. And I think and so now you're seeing a lot of those kids, Gen Xers my age, and I'm speaking from anecdotal, but I've looked to the left of me, looked to the right of me, people I've known a long time. This is what's happened. Obviously, people in my parish that I hang out with most of the time, it's not the case. But a lot of the people my age lost the faith is basically directly because, yeah, their grandparents might have said the rosary and affected the following generation somewhat, but your parents didn't. And maybe they went to mass every Sunday, but they didn't say the rosary. That simple act, I guess you think that could be the difference between saving a generation and not?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it seems simple. It seems like a stupid simple answer, quite frankly. But this is the way that our Lord works. I love the parable or the story of Naaman in the Old Testament. Elisha goes to Naaman because Naaman has leprosy, and he says, okay, just bathe in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be cured. And then he gets mad. He says, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. Are there not rivers near me that are better than the Jordan River? No, I'm not going to do that. One of his servants comes up and says, look, if Elisha had told you to do something crazy, you would have done it. So why don't you just do what he said? Why don't you just bathe in the Jordan? And then he goes, and lo and behold, he bathes in the Jordan 7 times, and he comes up and his flesh is renewed. It's like the skin of a baby. That's what the Bible says. So these small things are incredibly important. These simple things are incredibly important. And it's become blatantly obvious to anyone who has looked into it to any degree at all. Look at Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Fatima. Look at what every pope for the past 200 years have said. Look at what the vast majority of the saints over the past 300, 400 years have said. They've all said that the rosary is the weapon for our time. They've all said in differing words, but with the same concept, that the rosary is the chain that binds Satan in hell. They've all said that the rosary is the most pleasing prayer to our Lord and Our Lady in these last times. Sister Lucia, the seer at Fatima, she said that there's no problem, be it temporal or spiritual, that cannot be solved by the faithful recitation of the rosary. And Padre Pio, the rosary is the weapon for it. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and give you just a dozen quotes off the top of my head. But the church is making it painfully obvious that this is the way that God wants his faithful people to draw closer to him. The church has put more indulgences on the rosary than on any other prayer throughout the entire history of the church. It's because Mother Church, the Pope, the saints, they're all begging us to do one thing, which is pray the rosary. So it's important for us to realize that while not praying the rosary is not a sin, it's important that we come to God and that we come to God in the way that he's clearly asking us to through his church. And that right now, the best means of doing that is the Holy Rosary.
Not praying the rosary may be a sin, but it may not be a sin, but it certainly is a red flag. Why are you not doing that?
Yeah, it's like, the Pope says so, the saints say so, the church says so. Maybe you should try it. Give it a shot.
Agree totally. And with regard to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Fortunately, as I said, I'm a good editor.
Well, then, since you lost your train of thought, I'll basically ask the question that we wanted to ask all of our guests. What to you does stewardship mean? What does it mean to be a good steward, and how do you steward from your perspective as an apologist, as somebody who's leading people deeper in their faith? What does it mean to be a steward?
To whom much is given, much is expected. And so I think that God's given me a grace to be painfully aware of the fact that I've been given many gifts, this platform, my intellectual capacity, my ability to teach, my family. I have tremendous gifts in this life. And so I do feel the weight, the obligation to do something with the gifts that God has given to me. And my strategy, my plan is to give it back to the Lord by consecrating everything to the Blessed Virgin Mary. At the end of my life, St. Therese of Lisieux puts it this way, and I'll modify it slightly to fit my thought here. But she says at the end of her life, she wants to appear before the Lord empty-handed because she's already given him everything. And I have the same disposition. At the end of my life, I want to appear empty-handed before the Lord, but because I gave everything to his mother. So that's my strategy is every business decision that I make, praying, asking Our Lady to give me guidance. Every phone call that I'm on, talking to people about trying to quit lust or any other problem, always say a Hail Mary before that. Every company that I start to own, every endeavor that I go into, every relationship, everything that I have, my family, my home, everything's consecrated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like I already said, if it belongs to Mary, it works out in the end. So that's my strategy for stewardship personally.
I do have one question. Generally, that's what we close down on, but I wanted to come back to the lust program, the pornography program, real quick. What I think you alluded to it earlier, but I want to hear you say it. What do you think the secret sauce is for what you're doing? Is it the aspect that you have this, you've pulled in more intellectual items like this Thomistic approach you have, or do you think that, well, that's good and that helps? At the end of the day, they're just looking for a normal person to be accountable to. And really, it's the fact that a big part of that is simply that you're a faithful, this is going to sound bad, but you're a faithful, warm body. So this is your particular approach, and how much of it is simply they have some accountability, some. And the good thing about you is I know you're realistic about your gifts. And so you're not going to soft sell it and downplay your impact. So be candid.
Yeah, I think that the thing that maybe sets my program apart is obviously we go over the basic stuff, strategies, what to do when you're tempted, how to get rid of as many temptations as possible by manipulating your environment. All that's good. It's all good. But I think what my program is specifically good at is awakening men to their purpose. Because I really think that the opposite of porn addiction is purpose. What gets men out of porn ultimately is purpose, recognizing that you were created in the image and likeness of Almighty God for some set task that you and only you can accomplish, and that you have enemies who are going to try to thwart you in any way possible, in the mundane and in the extraordinary. And just recognizing that there's a battle going on and that God himself is calling you to be a part of it. And this is the first victory you must win before you can make any other advancements on the enemy. And I think that just waking men up to that purpose solves 95% of their problems. Not that there's not strategies and techniques. It's that, like, all that's good. All that's good. But if you have the best sword in the world, but you don't have a desire to wield it, then you're a worthless soldier. And so I think that's what my program does specifically, is it helps wake men up to this incredible purpose that God himself has breathed into the lives of every single human person.
All right. That does it for me. Michael, you got anything before I close it down?
No, just thank you for being on the program, and really good luck with everything that you're doing. God bless you.
Absolutely,
Yes,
man. Thanks for
certainly.
having me
God
on,
bless you.
guys. Appreciate you.
Just real
Good
quick,
deal.
a couple things. You can find us at taylorfrigon.com. And of course, Cameron is at Cameron Riecker. That's Reicker, correct?
Riecker.
RIE. No, it was right in my mind, but I said it wrong. RIE. Trust me. So Reicker. And then Cameron the Catholic on Instagram, correct?
It's Cameron_Riecker
And
now. I changed it.
oh, you did change it. Okay. I went
But I'm
off an interview I heard
still
from you earlier. I was listening to oh, you're still Catholic. Okay. All right. And so Cameron, thank you so much for joining us and for the great work you're doing. You're a credit to the city of Phoenix, the Phoenix metro area, the state of Arizona, the state of Indiana for that matter. So thanks for all your great work.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron.